update on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Nico.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. Depends on whatever time zone you're in. It's an honor for me to give you this talk and the SANS OSINT Summit recently. This is a recap of the same talk I gave there. For me, it's really important to tell about open source intelligence as a state of mind. So that's what this talk is all going to be about. First, let me briefly introduce myself. Well, as said, my name is Nico Dekens. I'm also known online as the Dutch OSINT guy. Well, I had a marvelous idea one day. I'm Dutch, I'm from the Netherlands. I like OSINT and I'm a guy, so I came up with this super extraordinary handle. But enough bad jokes. I'm an ex-police cyber analyst. I briefly worked at Bellingcat as a project manager. Some people may also know me from being the co-founder of the OSINT Curious project, where we do bi-weekly webcasts and blogs every week. And I'm a SANS instructor for the SEC 487 Open Source Intelligence Gathering and Analysis course. And by nature, I'm trained as an all-source analyst, but I really, trained myself to be a specialist when it comes to do with everything that has to do with open source intelligence in general. Before I start off, I cannot stress enough to briefly show you the definition, or at least my definition of open source intelligence. Because people in general have a misunderstanding of open source intelligence. They just gather information, in my opinion, and it only becomes intelligence. That's where the last three letters are from OSINT. Once you have gathered publicly available information that you collect, exploit, and report, and most importantly, it has to address a specific intelligence requirement. So it has to answer a question. So you can't just grab pieces of information and say, now I've gathered open source intelligence. No, because it says nothing. It's just that matter. It's just pieces of a puzzle, and you need to put the puzzle together to get a better understanding of the picture in its whole. So that's the definition of open source intelligence. And what I find really important is that you get an understanding that open source intelligence is not a tool. It's not an operating system you install on your system like Linux or a Buscador, or the one we hand out in the open source intelligence SEC 487 SANS course. That's just a vehicle you can use to get to drive the road and to get somewhere. The same can scrape IP addresses from and later compare it to location lists, or other scrapers that get pieces of information, let's say email addresses from a certain website, or an add-on you use to take screenshots, or maybe an add-on you use to grab information from certain JavaScript fields. Isn't a tool, but the tools are needed to answer those specific information requirements and research questions you are trying to ask yourself, or maybe someone has given you. So almost every day I get a request in my email box, a Twitter DM, on my LinkedIn, or what it was not there when we could meet in real. People ask me, Nico, please tell me, give me that one tool to rule them all. So give me that one tool which I can grab, and it will be capable of fulfilling all my information requirement needs, and also giving me all the information I'm looking for. So it must be able to scrape Twitter data, it must be able to go to Reddit and grab information, but it must also be able to leverage information from search engines like Bing, Google, Yandex, or DuckDuckGo. There is no one tool to rule them all. Well, I like to think that there is one tool to rule them all. And as you can see in the picture here, I think the one tool to rule them all is your mind, because it all starts with an idea and a question. And it all starts by really critically thinking of what that client asks you to do, or what that client asks you to find out, or what research questions you have as a journalist, or just in general as an open source intelligence investigator. So it starts with critical thinking. And when you start to think as a person, we all have bias, and bias has something to do with where we are born, or maybe what we have learned from our parents, or what we have learned in school. These things form us during our life. But also maybe religion tells us or prohibits us to not look at certain information, which could blur out our investigation. But also political views, or maybe just your nationality, has something to do with the bias that form you as a person. But you got to keep those biases in mind. So, but also fallacies, like logical fallacies, like making assumptions because something just sounds logical, or you have done this in this way your whole life, or your personal experience is, well, my last 5 research cases, I walked this path and I found the answer in this way, so it has to be there, versus a thorough analysis and assessing if the information is there, or is the information valuable, or can it be trusted. And or another fallacy could be you are accepting information as is because there is a lack of information. So not finding information gives you some kind of confirmation bias. Aha, that criminal has no online presence, so that confirms that he is doing criminal activities. Or he has no Instagram account, or he has no presence on a web form. So all these fallacies you must keep in mind. But also, I've seen numerous cases where a client gives you an assignment, and in some way, weird way, you get scared and you want to make a report with an outcome that fits the client's needs, instead of making a report with facts and a thorough analysis which say what's there. So all these things are, let's say, points that you must keep in mind by using your mind during this whole open source intelligence process. So you must prevent creating your own truth, instead of making an objective analysis based on facts, or staring yourself blind on initially found information, or anchoring in info so deep in your investigation results that other facts are being denied or not seen. It's all things like tunnel vision. You are not looking at evidence that may contradict the other evidence you found. Or just things like, I do not believe in coincidence, so it has to be true. All these things, you have to be your own devil's advocate, or you must doubt your own questions. Am I asking the right questions? Is the data that's given back, is that correct? So when I look at a report, 9 out of 10 times, I see a lot of things missing. For instance, just an initial research question. What was the one question you were trying to answer when you got started? Or when someone asked you to look for something online, they wanted to have an answer to something. So what was that research question? And once you define that question, what sources did you pick? And why did you pick those sources and not the other sources in your toolbox? And what makes you think that these sources are reliable? Based on what? And once you've done your research with these hand-picked sources, what gaps are left behind in your research? These are all things you must keep in mind. But also making a choice of choosing the keywords which you use to make a search query in let's say Google or maybe Bing, why did you choose those words in specific in relation to the initial research question you are trying to answer? And why did you use a tool or a script? And can you trust that tool and script again? So all these things, in my opinion, must be in the report, because only then you can be transparent to your clients as well as yourself, but also show your investigative crumb path at all times, because that's something that I think is really important when it comes to really thinking about what you're doing each and every investigation. You make a choice. Do I go left? Do I go right? Based on the information that I've already found, or the information that has been given to me initially, or based on the research question I'm trying to answer. So all these things are really important and must be kept in mind. So I cannot stress enough, once you are start writing up a report, or let's say a journalistic piece which you want to put up on a blog or a news site, maybe you should call out what research questions you couldn't answer and why couldn't you answer them, because a partial answer is an answer too, so you must describe it. And also, lastly but not least, not finding an answer is an answer to a question too. There's nothing wrong with saying, well, I came up with this idea, I picked these and these tools, I looked up this and it, and this and these things, and the answer was nothing. Doesn't mean that the answer is wrong. No, you tried your best, you described what you have done, and you found nothing. Doesn't mean when you, for instance, look a week later or a month later, or maybe a colleague looks at your report and says, did you try this? Because now you've been transparent and you've showed them what you've done. You showed them what you've chosen on tools and keywords. And maybe they said, well, did you pick this keyword or did you pick this tool? And you say, no, I totally forgot about this one. Let me go back. And then maybe you will find a partial answer or the whole answer to your question. So it's really important, once you come to a conclusion in your investigation, that you describe everything you've done, every research question, and which question could you answer and which question couldn't you answer. So it's all about an investigative crumb path. And the investigative crumb path, in my opinion, is about keeping track of every step you take. There's a song about that one, but I won't be missing you about this one. You keep track of your thought process also, and you must exhaust your resources. Circling back, by keeping track of every step you take, it's really important, like I said, like a few moments ago, I see a research like a highway, and the highway with a destination which I know there is or must be, but I'm not sure which intersection I must take to get there. So every time I make a decision to go left or right, or take a roundabout and go maybe back or go halfway or a third, is a thought process. So I take a step based on thoughts, and I'm describing why I'm doing this. And I'm also describing why in this pace of my investigation, I'm picking this tool out of my resource box. So maybe I've got a gazillion bookmarks which are all useful for looking up Instagram information. Maybe I want to exhaust them all, just because I want to be thorough and I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I'm taking a quick step out, because this picture you see on the left is an Xmind, and I want to make it a little bit bigger and show you what you could do. Not saying that this is the golden rule, but it might just work for you. So this is the same picture you've just seen in the slide deck, and I'm going in depth in a moment. But what I like to do is take a mind map, and you can do whatever mind map tool you like. I just like using Xmind for this case, but whatever works for you. I like to make one main research question. And once I define that main research question, I will come up with sub-questions. And what I mean by the sub-questions, I will let you know in a moment. But once I've defined my main research question and my sub-questions, I will be able to gather keywords. The keywords are needed to come up with pivot points. So the pivot points could be phone numbers, could be things like organization information, usernames, real names, geolocations, emails, whatever is needed that's connected or could be connected to that, to finding the answer, to finding that piece of the puzzle to answer your research question. Once I've found those keywords, I basically feed those keywords into tools, and those tools can be either just a browser and a search engine like Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo or Yandex, or things like an OSINT framework, which can help me pivot into, or maybe a Python script that helps me enumerate something or find DNS information, whatever is needed to answer that research question again. Maybe another tool, an automated tool like Multigo, for instance, which can grab larger sums of information because something by hand is just not quick enough. And there's the manual sources. So those keywords can pivot me into, let's say, for instance, social media. I can start looking on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, maybe TikTok, whatever, because I know, for instance, it's about a person. It's about John Doe. Well, where could John Doe be? Could he be on social media? I know his username. So could he be on Facebook? Could he be on Twitter? But also maybe I can find his name in a news site or academic research papers, or maybe even the dark web, or general forums and blogs. So the research question distills into keywords. Keywords are needed to either feed into tools or additional sources. Once you have got these pieces of information, you start collecting the information, you get the raw information. And the raw information is basically all those pieces of the puzzle, but the pieces of the puzzle will contain noise. So you need to distill, sort, and refine those pieces of information. And once you've done that, you can analyze the information. And once you've analyzed it, you'll maybe come to a conclusion and report. And if not, you can take these steps again, and maybe once you're writing your analysis, you've come to the conclusion you need to take some step backs and maybe come up with some additional keywords or tools or whatever, and do this process again. So it could be an endless loop, but in the end, the report should answer the main research question. Going back to the slides again, I've created a methodology to do this because I've been doing this for, well, I think almost 20 years now, 23 to be precise. I've been doing analysis as an operational, tactical, and strategical analyst with the last 15 years doing 9 out of 10 times doing open source intelligence research. I've created a methodology and it just works best for me, and I hope it will work for you too. I will take you through the steps. I call it the 14-step methodology. It's no dance, it's no kind of new hot term, it's just a methodology I created. So 1, it all starts with picking a research subject. So what you should do, in my opinion, is do an intake with your client. Could be your boss, could be someone that hires you, and you should define one answerable question. So the example you'll see here on the screen on the left-hand side is sometimes the client will say, give me everything about John Doe. My answer would be, what is everything? Please describe everything. Because if you mean everything, we would need a gazillion tons of hard drives, and we should start downloading the entire internet right now, and then you'll have everything about John Doe. Because I do not know at this moment in time what you mean by give me everything. The right question is, has John Doe been to location X, for instance. So it's your job as an open source intelligence analyst to maybe take your client by the hand and say, well, I understand that you want everything, but what do you mean by everything? What are you trying to find out or figure out about John Doe? And then your client probably says, well, I want to know where he has been at this date, or maybe I want to know where he was with whom at this date, or similar questions, or I want to know which vendor sells intellectual stolen property, for instance, from a certain brand. So all these things must be really taken in consideration, and you must really take the time to do this intake thoroughly. And there's nothing wrong with doing an initial intake, going back to the office, or writing up the intake and come to the conclusion that that one answerable question isn't defined well enough, and you could just call your client up or send them an email and say, hey, am I correct that you want to find out this, this, and this, or should we do an additional call? There is nothing wrong with that. I've done that a gazillion times when I thought when doing it, okay, I'm 100% confident the client wants to know where John Doe has been. And I was back in the office, but I didn't ask when. And that's really valuable because I can figure out where someone has been, but when was it? Because if someone has a huge online presence and posts like 15 pictures a day for over 10 years, it could take weeks, if not months, for me to go through all those pictures and figure out if John Doe is either in that picture, or I can find information that can confirm that he was at a certain location. So maybe by going back to my client and asking for a specific date or a date range, I can have a better one answerable question that's really defined. So you have to do your homework on the subject, but also you need to know your adversary. So it depends on what you're doing. When it's low profile, maybe your adversary isn't a nation state or someone that looks back at you as an investigator, or maybe at the client. So maybe they have set all kind of digital traps, and once you land on their site, they will get alarmed that someone has a specific interest at a specific subject. At least someone is interested. So you should do some homework on your adversary, but also you should know your client. What's their interest? What do they want to know? And sometimes you might come to the conclusion here that the question is so broad or so complex that you just need help. You need an extra pair of hands, you need some extra expertise. Maybe you need to fly in some expertise who have feet on the ground and give you some additional information. It all depends in general. Coming back to point 3 now, once you've found that one answerable question, it becomes the main research question. And that one main research question needs some additional questions to try to answer that main research questions. Sometimes you'll have sub-questions. So for instance, has John Doe been in location X? Maybe you have a sub-question in this date range. And if you can't find the date range, you still can try and answer that question just by looking at the location. And maybe you have to go through all those pictures over months and months. But to answer that main research question, point 3 gives you some extra hands by using the W's, the golden W's. So to answer a main research question, you always must ask, what happened? The what? The where? Where did something happen? Or when did it happen? With what? So all these things you must keep in mind, because these can make your the way you pivot into your toolbox, the way you pivot into your tools that you know. Say, for instance, you want to use Multigo, or you just want to use Google. Once you know when something happened, you know how to specify a date range within your tools. But also, once you know with whom, for instance, someone was, let's say John Doe visited location X with, I don't know, Jane, maybe we can find the information just by looking at Jane and not even having to look at John Doe. So it's really important that you use the W's, the what happened, where did it happen, when did it happen, with what was needed to make it happen. So maybe if he visited location X, he needed a car, he needed a plane or a bike or some other means of transportation. Maybe you can confirm his location because he posted a picture on his Instagram with a plane ticket on it that says, well, this is flight number 123 going to location X. But also what was needed or done to make it happen. Maybe he needed money and he committed some crime or robbery to make it happen. And the hardest to answer question, a sub-question for your main research question is, in my perception, almost always the why. Why someone does something 9 out of 10 times can only be really analyzed by interviewing the person or asking questions to them directly, because it's really hard to find out why someone or something is happening. Why is COVID happening now? It's a question that everyone is trying to answer, but we can try and figure out what happened, where did it happen, when did it happen, what was needed to make it happen. All those questions we can use to try and answer a main research question. Once you've come up with those research questions, you can start to define sources. So once you know to figure out what happened or where did John go, you might want to pivot into YouTube, you might want to pivot into Twitter, or you might even want to go to TikTok or Snapchat because you know that that user handle is very active. So it's really important for you that you define your sources based on your research question and the intake with your client, because they need to provide you with enough starting information for you to start thinking of where to look, how to look, and what you are going to use to look into those pieces of information. Once you've grabbed all your sources, and what I just like to say, once you grab sources, it's basically, let's say you're a plumber and you'll have your toolbox. Well, if there's a leakage somewhere, you know which tool to pick from your toolbox to fix that leakage. In my opinion, when you're doing open source intelligence research, once you're in this field for a couple of years, you will have filled your toolbox, and you, with the OSINT state of mind, will know what tool to pick to answer what question at a certain moment of time. And if you cannot define sources by naming specific platforms, maybe you just want to gather keywords. Here you see a picture of a tool which I will briefly show in a moment. What would I like to do? Sometimes I just don't know everything. How weird is that? I don't know everything. So sometimes I need to do some preliminary research just to get a better understanding about a certain subject or subject matter that I'm just not that good at. When and with what, I would just go and look for keywords which can give me additional information to get a better understanding about something. So let me briefly show you an example. Let's say, not from the Netherlands, let's say I'm from, I don't know, I'm from the United States, and I've never been to Amsterdam, I've never been to the Netherlands, I have no understanding about the people here, but I have to find out, has John Doe been to an island? I could use a tool like let me find my mouse here. Yes, I could use a tool like, let me see, where's my browser? My browser is here. The related words one. And I will show all the URLs which I show in this webinar at the end. So no need to Google it now. This one is called related words, and I particularly like this tool because it gives you a quick glance of something. Let's say I have no understanding of Amsterdam. I would just type in Amsterdam, and it will show me places that are related to it, so other cities, but also it's the capital of the Netherlands. There are boroughs of Amsterdam. There are Rembrandt is connected to it. These are neighborhoods within Amsterdam. So these are keywords I can use to get a better understanding or to pivot into specific places to try and answer my research questions. Let's just say John Doe visited Amsterdam and he tweeted, I'm now doing a canal ride, which you can do in Amsterdam, and it's beautiful. I can only say that once you visit there. I'm now doing a canal ride through the neighborhood doing the Jordaan. He never names Amsterdam in there. But now you know that Jordaan is a little, let's say, neighborhood within Amsterdam. These are pieces of information you can try and corroborate into your research and come up with keywords to get a better understanding of your initial research question and sub-questions, which can make you exhaust your resources better. So this is just a tool which I really like to use, but there are other keyword tools which show you related words around a certain keyword. Back to the presentation. Once you've come up with your research question, you've defined your sources, you've gathered keywords, you come to choose your tools. And here's where you need to keep your operational security in mind, because things can go really sideways here. If you didn't look up your adversary properly, you could go wrong on the intersection and your whole mission can be compromised. And that could have implications for your research device, but also for your research questions, and more important, to the client or maybe the people involved with your researching. So when I choose tools, I try and look for trusted tools. Who owns the tools? Can it be trusted? Are the servers where it's hosted on, can they be trusted? Or other tools, when I automate certain stuff, will it be a tell for a server administrator or a host once I do automated requests to a website? But other things that are not so operation security related, how do I visualize large amounts of data? Do I need a tool like Gephi? Do I need a Multigo? Do I need maybe a mind mapping tool to visualize stuff? And what do I need for manual research? Do I only need search engines, or do I need access to certain paid tooling? Because keep in mind, in my opinion, if the information is out on the internet and you need to pay a couple of bucks for it, or a couple of dollars, it's still open information because it's accessible for each and everyone who's willing to pay for it. The information is there. So choose your tools, but choose them wisely. Don't just pick a tool because it's shiny. Recently, there was a case where MW OSINT, Matthias Wilson, posted about a certain tool, which you could have your doubts with about the people who made the tool. Doesn't say it's a bad tool, but it's something to keep in mind, operation security-wise. Step 7, because we are not even searching. So keep in mind, this is all about the OSINT state of mind. We haven't started searching yet. We haven't touched our mouse or keyboard to actually doing any investigation yet. We're doing that now. We're doing a quick scan. Why do we need a quick scan? I think it's really important, especially when it's even with a simple research question, you need to do a timer search. So what I would like to do is just set an alarm clock on my watch or whatever, and just look for 30 minutes or an hour, just to get a general understanding of what's out there, just get a general feel of the amount of information I get exposed to trying to answer my main research question and the possible subset of questions and those W's I'm trying to answer. It really prevents me from drowning in information. I've got numerous cases where I did a timer search and the information that came back was immediately so overwhelmingly much that I went back to the client and said, well, hey, you gave me a week for this, but I did a quick scan. This is what I found until now. I need either more time or I need an extra pair of hands just to try and answer your research question within the scope and time set. So it's really important that you not immediately go deep. Just look at a glance what's out there to get an understanding and feel of the amount of information, especially in this digital information age. It can be so much and so overwhelming for you to drown in pieces of information. Once you've done that, you've got some preliminary findings. And in those preliminary findings, you should check if you are finding what you expected to find. So if you are finding pivot points that you can corroborate or use to try and answer either the W questions, the who, the what, the where, the with, whom, the when, the why, or your initial research question, because now is the time to go back in time and maybe refine your research question, the other resources which may give you pieces of information that you expect to find. Let's say you are finding what you expect to find. Then you can proceed to go towards step 9. Step 9 is gathering the needed information. So you will use the research questions, you will use the keywords, you will use the tools, and most importantly, you will exhaust each and every resource that you have within your toolbox and within your knowledge to answer that research question. So do not stop once you have found the answer to the research question. Try to find the same answer using or walking another path or using another tool just to get extra confirmation, because one source is no source. 2 sources are okay for information, but 3 or more, that's better, because now the trustworthiness of finding the answer to your question and the way you can validate the confidence level is now up way higher. So 1 is no, 2 is good, 3 or more is best in my opinion. And sometimes it's just impossible to find more than 1 source, but at least try. Do not stop. Exhaust your resources. So you gathered all the information. You ingested all the information. It took you, let's say, 2-3 weeks, maybe months. Now it comes to refining and analyzing all that information. Let's say if you used automated tools, well, you most likely would need to clean the data, because you have Excel tables, you have maybe CSV files, which you all need to clean to get one good clean set of data. Maybe you need to cut out noise because there's too much data which you grabbed, and there's a lot of noise in there which could blur your vision. So it's all about ordering, tagging, and labeling the information for you to get a better understanding in your analysis. Then you start connecting the dots. And with connecting the dots, you will also see, or should at least try to see, to find the unknowns. Are there still W's that I cannot answer? Are there still pieces of my sub-questions that I cannot answer? So what questions can I still not answer? And maybe I need to go back in time and review my information. So I've gathered my information gathering and analysis, and am I still expecting what I'm finding what I'm expecting to find, or am I drifting away, or am I only finding half of the information, or do I get a hunch that I need to pick another tool to get a better understanding of the information? So check your findings again. And if your findings are not satisfactory enough, repeat step 1 to 8 because you've now gained new knowledge. You've been almost at the end of the process, so you should have come to almost at the point that you have made intelligence. So you've made open source intelligence. The question is not answered enough. So you might, with the new gathered knowledge, want to repeat every step. So it's an endless loop. Sometimes people, it takes time, good open source intelligence, a lot of time. Report, the most dull and not popular piece of open source intelligence. My tip would be take your time to write if you have time. Sometimes you just have a deadline, your boss or client needs to have the report by the end of the day. Report, man, go for it, but include everything. But also report what you did not find. And maybe try and stress test your finding with analysis of competing hypotheses. Are really important to check if your findings are consistent and the answers are not based on bias, for instance. Once you've written the report, my advice would be let the report rest if there's time. Just let it lay around for, let's say, a couple of hours, maybe a day, maybe a few days, and be your own devil's advocate. Try and read your own report like through the eyes of your client, or maybe try and read the report if you were someone else. But more important, keep your bias in mind. Do not make it become a tunnel vision with a self-fulfilling prophecy. So my tip would be, and this is a tip I got, I think 10 years ago from another analyst when I was back in the Dutch law enforcement, read your report. And I figured out it's even better to let someone outside of the field, your working field, proofread your report. So I'm in the cyber open source intelligence unit. Maybe I would like to let, I don't know, my wife, who is a school teacher, read my report, if possible, if there isn't confidential information in it. But maybe just someone from the team next door who are in DFIR, for instance, or maybe some other forensics team. Let them proofread your report. You will be amazed what they will pick out of your report that's wrong or has logical fallacies within it, or maybe assumptions, or they will just point out a tool or a keyword that you just overlooked and missed. So for me, it's really important that the final stage, the reporting, time for, and you must be vulnerable. You must be open for people commenting on it. You must be open for people pointing out faulty conclusions or whatever. So take your time, be your devil's advocate, and let other people proofread your report. Well, and the end, yay, send in the report for your client. And in my opinion, sometimes your client will come back with additional questions. So what I would say, when they come back with additional questions, just repeat step 1 to 14, because now you know which steps you need to have the OSINT state of mind to really get a good understanding of how to conduct a proper open source intelligence or online investigative piece of research to answer a question or to answer a specific information requirement. So that's it. I want to thank you all for your time. 2 brief things. If you want to read into this, I made a blog I think 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago. Top URL, the bit.ly OSINT mind state will point you to the blog. It will have everything in there which I've just shown you, only not well, more brief. And the URLs which I discussed or let you show, and I want to show you one more just because I like you all, is this one. I like the Xmind, like I said before. My good friend Micah Hoffman, he is the course author of the SANS Sec 487 on his GitHub repo, which is in the URL which I just posted. He gives you this mind map, and this mind map is all about the goals of the assessment. What am I looking for? All you need to start your investigation is in this mind map, and you can download Xmind for free on xmind.com. You can download this template for free, and it will give you the whole OSINT process with all kinds of resources for you to fill or to try and pivot into, to try and answer that research question. The data collection process, which you can fill out, everything is in here. So again, if you need the information, it's on the paste bin. URLs will be up. I will drop them on my social media Twitter account too, if people would like them. And otherwise, always feel free to shoot me either an email or hit me up on Twitter, and I'll be more than happy to give you some additional information about your tag, or about this talk. So that's it. I would really like to thank you all for your time, and if there are any questions, I'm here for a while.
Great, thank you, Nico, for that awesome presentation. We do have a few questions in the Q&A, so I'll just kick the first one off. What do you use to keep track of your steps?
Yeah, I'm really fond of, well, like I told, Xmind. That's my #1 tool to keep mind of my steps. But I also just a general text editor, either plain text editor or Word or whatever. But Xmind is my #1 stop.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we also consider name changes or middle names as possible leads for other areas of finding a John or Jane Doe? Do we also look at dating websites for other areas of intelligence in regards to OSINT task?
Yes, in my opinion, that's all about exhausting your resources. So if someone's name could be on a dating site, why not look there? If you didn't look there and his or her name or picture or confirmation for that location was out there, you should have tried it at least.
Sure. Interesting question here. How do we protect ourselves against OSINT?
That's a good question. By not oversharing. I think it's really important to be really aware of what you share online, and is there a need or necessity to share that piece of information, and is that piece of information making me or my loved ones vulnerable? I think those things should be really important for having an online presence, yes or no.
Great, thank you. Do you have any recommendations for determining a person's name from a picture?
That's a good, well, you could try, so recommendations for determining a person's name for a picture. So assuming that the person asking the question is that the name is already on that picture, well, it could be either a person that's already tagged in there. For example, on Facebook or Instagram, another person can tag the person's name in there. So those pop up automatically once you mouse over or hover over the picture in general. But there are also tools that can extract text from pictures. So basically they do object recognition or text recognition, OCR, to detect text that's on there. So, and there are a lot of tools. I can't even name them all. So look for OCR detection on pictures.
Great. What is the best approach to aggregate and sort through large amounts of data?
There is no best approach, because every research question is a research question on its own, and it has a specific requirement and a specific need. So large amounts of data can be either plain text or pictures or sometimes even video. So I would need several tools to sift through them. It could either be an elastic search engine or Kibana, or maybe just general a tool to do social network analysis. So in my opinion, there is no best approach. I think the best approach would be, again, the process. So the state of mind process to, I've got these pieces of information that generate a large amount of a certain sort of data. What do I need to get a better understanding of the collected data? What kind of visualization tool do I need?
Sure. How do you go about tagging and classifying the information? Do you do this as you go or at the end of the research? Do you use a specific tool to organize the information by a category or tag?
Tagging could be either in something like Excel or a spreadsheet or whatever, or it could be done in more automated tools like, for instance, a Kibana instance or Elasticsearch, what I just said. Whatever works for you or whatever works for that amount of data. I personally like to label and tag at the stage where I've collected the information. Once I've come to the point that I say, well, I'm satisfied, I've got enough information to at least start analyzing and try to answer the questions. That's where I start tagging and labeling.
Great, thank you. Is there a path to follow in order to start out in the OSINT world?
Yeah, sure, there is a path to follow. My suggestion would be just start lurking on the internet, looking for the hashtag open source intelligence, or start looking at the OSINT Curious weblog, or follow a SANS OSINT course. But in general, it's all about being curious. You'll have something like Quiz Time on Twitter, where they post a picture for you to find out where the location is, and you can learn from that. So the thread underneath it, people will explain how they found it, and so you get started. But you also get started on knowing the people in this field and just talk to them, because in my opinion, the open source intelligence community is an open community. People like to talk and like to teach and learn others their skills.
Great, thank you. A few people asking if the presentation or recording of the presentation will be available. Yes, this will be available in your SANS portal account. You can navigate to your account dashboard and click My Webcasts for that one. A lot of people here thanking you for a really great presentation, Nico.
It was my pleasure.
A couple more, just two more questions before we wrap it up.
Sure.
How do you tackle a situation where you are after a person who has an alternative digital presence, like a pseudo account name or location?
In my opinion, especially when it comes to humans, at a certain moment of time, they will, mind my language, fuck up. They will they will screw up at some point, because it's very, very, very hard to be consistent 100% of the time of keeping up a false persona or a false identity online. Either your choice of words can be connected or corroborated to your original name, maybe photos that can be connected to your house or your garden or your school or your work. It's just about being persistent, having tenacity as an open source intelligence researcher, and looking for those pieces of information which you can connect to both accounts.
Great, thank you. And the final question before we wrap up, how do you aggregate data into ELK stack using ELK?
Oh, yeah, well, that depends on what research question I'm trying to answer. There's so much information which you can disclose in an ELK stack, so that would be an whole presentation on its own. So in my opinion, an ELK stack, for me, it's just putting in data and trying to make sense of it, but it all depends on what kind of data I'm putting in there. So it's maybe not a satisfying answer, but we just don't have time to talk about that stuff now.
Big answer, sure, makes sense. Any other questions that anyone thinks of can be submitted either to the details directly to Nico that you see on the screen here, or to q@sans.org, and we will make sure that we get those questions to Nico. But yes, Nico, thank you so much for your awesome presentation, for bringing this content to the SANS community, and to our audience. We greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all of our upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. And until next time, take care. We hope you join us again for the next SANS webcast.
Yeah, thanks all for attending.